thought at one point, Wardlow was one of the hottest acts in professional wrestling. And how could you argue with it, really? The reactions he was getting, the stories he was in, it was all great stuff. But nowadays, it really feels like Wardlow has lost all that has made him special. The reactions he's getting, they're just not it anymore. The stories, they're just not it anymore. But how did we get here? How did Wardlow lose everything that made him Wardlow? That's what we're here to talk about today. My name is Cosk. Welcome to the Wrestling Universe channel. And today, we're going to talk about what went wrong with Wardlow. But before we get into what went wrong with Wardlow, we have to get into what went right with Wardlow. And we have to look back at his career. He was an AEW original. He was there in their first few months of Dynamite as MJF's bodyguard. He had that great steel cage match with Cody Rhodes and included that moonsault up the cage by Cody. And really, he played his role as MJF's bodyguard throughout his initial career. He was the bodyguard for, let's say, 2-3 years. And in that time, he got over with the crowd with the Powerbomb Symphony. It was simple, it didn't require a lot, it was a powerbomb and a sparkle of charisma, and Wardlow was the hottest guy in AEW. Every time Wardlow would have a match against this local talent, the fans would be chanting his name, the fans would be cheering for the Powerbomb Symphony. Wardlow would leave MJF and they'd go into a good feud, a arguably great feud. And this was probably the best time of Wardlow's career. The fans would be chanting his name as his entrance team would be taken out. He would be banned from the arena and his face would be plastered over the show saying this man is banned, which hell, it felt like he was the direction of Dynamite at some point, and the fans were all for it because this was an MJF story. And an MJF story always works, and hey, Wardlow did his part. Wardlow, I think, did a great job in this. However, I feel like this was the beginning of the end. As in, this story was great, but the ending of it is where we begin the fall. We head into Double or Nothing 2022. It's a squash match. Wardlow obliterates MJF. And you might be thinking, okay, MJF doing the job, giving Wardlow a big win, the most humiliating loss of MJF's career. This is going to do wonders for Wardlow. Except the story wasn't on Wardlow. It was on the contract situation between AEW and MJF. Wardlow felt like an afterthought in this. And his booking after this did not help him at all. He would move on to a feud with Mark Sterling and security guards after this. He'd go into the TNT title scene where he'd win the title, he'd have a boring run, he'd lose the title, he'd win the title again, he'd have a boring run and just rinse and repeat. Wardlow no longer felt special. Wardlow felt like just any other guy. Except worse. He just felt bland. So what went wrong with Wardlow? Well, it's simple. The timing of his big moment just wasn't right. The stories he was in were plain bad and boring. And instead of taking him up to the main event scene after he squashed one of AEW's biggest names, he just went into the mid card like it was nothing. This was fundamentally bad booking, and at the same time, maybe Wardlow just wasn't ready. Maybe Wardlow just wasn't the in-ring performer that you'd expect from an AEW top guy, and that's held him back too. But what can AEW do to save Wardlow's career? Well, I have a few pitches, and the main one really revolves around the Collision run. We've seen a lot of guys get their careers revitalized by going to AEW Collision. We've seen it with the House of Black, we've seen it with Miro, we've seen it with FTR, we've seen it with Andrade. We've seen a lot of AEW acts who were either struggling or just pure out failing on AEW TV, and we've seen them get revitalized into top acts on Collision. If Wardlow were to be given that chance, I really feel like he could do some great things. He also has to get out of the TNT title picture. I feel like that's a mandatory thing. I feel like fans are sick of seeing him in that title picture. And I feel like it's causing bad will at Wardlow. Another suggestion would be maybe to turn him heel. I feel like a guy that size with that gimmick doesn't really fit as a babyface, and they've tried him as a babyface and it just hasn't worked. I've seen a lot of people pitch him going back to MJF, but personally I think that's just regressing. Although, if you were to maybe do a mid-card heel thing as a monster and then move up the feud with a babyface MJF, I feel like that could be the biggest feud of his career, eclipsing the heel MJF feud. But what do you guys think? Do you think Wardlow can be saved in AEW, and how would you do it? My name's Cosk. Thank you for joining me. Subscribe to the Wrestling Universe. Have a good day.